Welcome. You're watching The Moody Lawyer. Justice served with experience and integrity.
Hello and welcome to The Moody Lawyer with attorney Josh Moody. With a rich background in law enforcement and a comprehensive legal career spanning criminal justice, personal injury, and civil matters, Josh offers a unique perspective on navigating the complexities of a legal system. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host, and today we're talking about what happens as a passenger in a car accident in California and how compensation actually works in those situations. Josh, thanks again for being with me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You know, when someone is injured as a passenger in a car accident, how is that situation legally different from when a driver is hurt?
It's really not legally different. It's still the same basic. You have to prove a case. You have to prove there's a duty, that somebody breached that duty, and that the breaching of the duty was the proximate cause of the injury, and that you suffered the injury. So the same basic elements still follow for the passengers as well as the driver. Now, being a passenger now, who you can recover from a lot of times changes. So that can make a difference. Between a driver and a passenger.
If both drivers share some fault for the crash, how does that affect an injured passenger's ability to recover compensation?
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of alluding to there is that if you're the passenger in a car and both drivers, let's just for the sake of arguments, 50-50 fault, you can recover from both the person who in the other vehicle who was driving, but you can also recover from the driver of the car you were in. And a lot of times that makes for a unique dynamic in these type of cases. Um, and it's really sometimes the tough ones are where actually the passenger is friends with the driver, and the driver that they're with is actually 100% at fault. Um, Now you have to go after that person, um, your friend, typically your friend, uh, somebody you know, to recover your damages.
How difficult is that to go after someone who's a friend or a family member in that instance? Can you maybe share some highlights of things without giving specific details about a case? What the challenges were?
Depending on the family relationship, you may not be able to recover from your own family. You can't recover from your spouse, things like that. But a lot of times when you're friends, and I've had a couple cases where one in particular where they were really good friends, but she made a left hand. So our client was sitting in the front passenger seat, the driver makes an illegal left turn, and of course, the car comes, and our client just took the whole brunt of the impact. It was horrible. I mean, her arm broken arm, everything. I mean, the whole right side of her body was broken. Um, she had to go after her friend because her medical bills were high and her injuries were high. And this is a friend. They were friends for many, many, many years, and I don't recall if they ever reconciled. But um, it's those type of things are difficult, but that's what you have to do because the other person was just driving straight. They didn't do anything wrong. They were driving under the speed limit. It just the person you were with, uh, breached your duty. Because as a driver, you owe a duty to the people in your car as well to drive safe. Um, those cases can be difficult for that reason.
And how do the insurance policies come into play when a passenger is hurt, especially if multiple vehicles are involved?
The same rules apply. Uh, so if you have a 25-50 policy, so what that means is a 25,000 or it's a $50,000 policy. It's the most they can pay out with no one person getting more than 25,000. So if you have four people involved, you have $50,000 to go around for four people. If you have two people involved, neither person get more than 25,000. So it can create it does create a lot of situations because let's say you have four people injured with a $50,000 overall policy. You could say 12.5 to each person, which comes out to 50. But let's say one person was paralyzed and another person just had back and neck pain. Well, the most that paralyzed person can get is 25,000. So now you have 25,000 to split between three people. So you have to apportion based on the damages and the injuries to each person. So that's about the difference with how when passengers come in and depending on how many people are involved. Um, but in terms of legally and how the insurance company handles it, it's still they do it the same way. It's just like any other case, and that's why they have those limits is because it limits their liability.
So when the at fault driver doesn't have enough insurance, are there other ways to recoup more dollars, or the limits are what's within the insurance policies?
Well, it depends. Lawyer answer. But you may have your own uninsured motorist that sometimes will kick in. And then again, if there is injury or if there is fault, that's why you try to apportion fault to either some other driver or maybe the city for lights or stop signs. Um, but yeah, correct. You're a lot of times you're bound by the policy limits of what the drivers were involved with. Um, I tell you that a lot of times the toughest cases are bus cases, city bus cases, because if the bus isn't at fault, you got 30 passengers on a bus, and a lot of times the person who rammed the bus only has a very minimal policy. It's hard to hit a bus. Buses are pretty easy to see, and I've had several bus cases where that's the case, and um, a lot of times what will happen, especially on those cases, it will go to some sort of lawsuit, and the insurance company will just say, "Here's our policy. We only have $50,000 on this case." They'll deposit the 50,000 with the court, and then they're out of it. And then they just let everybody else. They let all the plaintiffs fight it out.
So the person that is at fault may be personally liable then because they didn't carry enough insurance. Is that an accurate statement, or can you make that correct, please?
Well, no, yeah. So personally liable just means you're liable, but if you're going to take the insurance money from them, then you can't go after them for any more of that money. Um, so if it's a $30,000 policy or $50,000 policy, what that means is the insurance company will the outfault driver will then just get out of the case by saying, here's our entire policy. We'll deposit it with the court, and like in the case of a bus, if there's 30 people on the bus who are injured, those 30 people are fighting it out to get their piece of the pie. If it's a smaller case, if it's just two vehicles or three vehicles, then the passenger, then you fight, between the four or five people who are involved. But yeah, so a lot of times the insurance company will just, of the person who caused the damages, will just say, here's the money. We don't care who gets what. We know we're going to give you the maximum we can pay, and and get out of the case that way.
Is that the time when it goes over to a civil case, though, where they go
Yeah.
after the at fault individual?
Yeah, so you'd have to file a civil case, and then you have to, and then they deposit it with the court. Correct. Sometimes, I mean, we've had cases where we can resolve it prior to litigation, especially if the policy limit's very limited, because then you don't want to waste your money on a lawsuit. Uh, but for the most part, that's what when there are multiple passengers involved, like I said, on bus cases or transportation cases, they will just what we call tender the policy. They'll turn it over, say, "Here's the most amount of money. You guys figure out who gets what."
And how do medical bills and lost wages get handled while the passenger's claims are still pending?
Well, again, it comes down to what's the value, what's the insurance policy. I mean, if there's a large amount of insurance, and that changes the dynamic too, then you just handle it the same way as any other case. Passengers and drivers legally have the same standing. It's just about how to recover and who you can recover from can sometimes change, because if you're the driver, you can't recover a percentage that you're at fault, right? But if you're a passenger, you can recover from the person you're in the car with. And a lot of times, now we're getting a lot more cases, Uber liability, Lyft liability, in trying to get money from hiring these people negligent, because you there's not a whole big background process to go through to become an Uber driver. Um, so there's liability in that way and how you can get them. And right now they're trying to lower the insurance limits of Uber drivers. And that's why, because the insurance companies want to limit their liability.
What are some common misunderstandings people have about passenger injury claims in California?
I think probably one would be, yeah, your own uninsured motorist can cover you in a as a passenger, and a lot of people don't understand that because you're not driving, but it is you can recover your uninsured motorist as a passenger and as a pedestrian. Again, it depends on the terms of your contract, but people don't realize that a lot. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, and a lot of times people don't understand that they can recover from the driver who they were with because you're not the one who's negligent. And that's why, I mean, sometimes it's, um, you have that conversation where you have to think and you have to advise your client, hey, you might want to consider, might have to file a lawsuit against your friend here because they were negligent in how they were driving. A lot of times people, and obviously, like with an Uber driver, they treat their Uber driver differently than they treat their friend. So they have no problem suing Uber or one of the other Lyft or the ride sharing um, services. So, but that's what a lot of times people just don't realize, that yeah, you're because you're not driving, you're not negligent. I mean, the only thing you can really be it's not even negligence, it's called contributory negligence, is if you don't have a seatbelt on or something like that. But other than that, you're just a passenger. You're owed a duty to for everybody on the road to drive safe.
Let's talk about some of the behaviors of a passenger who may have been involved in an incident. For someone who was hurt while riding in someone else's car and they're unsure about what to do next. I know you're going to say it depends because that's your lawyer answer, but do we actually speak up and talk to the people at the scene, or do we stay quiet and seek attorney until later before we give our testimony or our recollection of what happened? Let's talk about some of the steps that can help protect their rights early on.
Yeah, yeah. So it depends. What are your injuries? A lot of times, obviously, too, if you're past, like in the case I cited earlier that I had, if you're taken to the hospital, obviously, um, it's hard to give a statement at the scene, but it's the same as anything else. Be truthful. A lot of times, passengers are reluctant to, to say something if their friend did something wrong. But my advice is just always just tell the truth. You really, again, you can't really damage your case because, um, like I said, you're not, you don't owe anybody a duty. You're just sitting there in the car. You have no control over the car. So it's a case by case basis and what happened and how you feel what happened. But for the most part, if my number one rule is just be honest and tell the truth and let the facts sort themselves out later. Um, it's it's hard. It's hard to you can't breach your duty if you're just a passenger in a car or on a bus. Cooperate. Go and but I would say probably the number one thing is if the person you're in the car with, the driver, asks you to lie, I would not do that, or try to cover for you. I would not do that. That's never good. I have seen cases too. I've had a couple cases where people try to switch. They'll make the passenger the driver, and the driver wants to be the passenger for some other reason. Don't do that. That will screw up your case. But if you're just a passenger in a car, you're injured, give yours. Be truthful, be honest. You can't go wrong.
And if the passenger is injured, can they go after both insurance companies if both the drivers were participants in the accident or the collision?
Yeah, if there's shared liability, yes, absolutely. That happens a lot. If there, let's say there's some type of illegal turning movement and another party's drunk or driving under the influence, or if there's some type of turning movement and there's speed is involved, high rate, breaking the speed limit at a high rate of speed, or a turning movement and violating a stop sign. So yeah, if there's shared liability, yes, you can go after both for sure. But
Okay.
the passenger can. The other driver, your driver cannot. Your driver can only go after the person for their share of the liability.
Any final thoughts for passengers or folks that may have been injured?
No, just if you're not sure, just give us a call. We're always available.
Great. Thanks so much for today, Josh. And thank you for listening to today's episode of The Moody Lawyer. If you were injured as a passenger in a car accident and you're unsure who is responsible for covering your losses, Josh and his team can help you understand your options and protect your claim. Visit moodylawyer.com to schedule a free case evaluation. And if you found this episode helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.